Good evening, everybody. I am so very happy that today we have the privilege of hosting Shri Ajay Piramal. I have known Ajay ji for several years now. I first heard about him as a very ardent devotee and student of the Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita from my Guruji and other friends in Chinmay Mission. And then I had the privilege of meeting him for the first time when we invited him to be the chief guest at the World Leadership Dialogue when we were celebrating Swami Chinmayananda's centenary. And then last year, I had the opportunity to work with Ajay ji and his group on an assignment. And I also got to experience him as a leader and saw firsthand the amount of love and affection that people have in the group while working with him. So thank you, Ajay ji, for agreeing to be part of our digital series. And thank you very much for spending your time this evening with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you. So Ajay ji, the first question I want to ask you is that out of all the things that you have done and this wonderful life that you have led, what is that time that you remember when you and your team and the organization were at your most joyful best? Something that happened that stands out for you as something remarkable that happened where all of you did something which brings you a lot of personal joy and happiness to everybody.
So if I think of, there have been many joyful times. So I think overall, I would say that my life has been full of joy. But probably one of the things that would stand out was at the time when we started first entering into pharmaceuticals and building that up. As a family, we were in the textile business. And the textile business, for many reasons, which I'm not going to go into now, all over the country, the whole industry was in a challenging time. And in 1987 was the time when we got a chance to look at the pharmaceutical industry. And then by 88, we did what was our first acquisition of a small multinational in India called Nicholas Laboratories. And then over the next 21 years, we built that up into a nice business. When we entered in 88, we were 48th rank in the industry. And in 2010, we had reached number 3. So what was really joyful was, I think, one is that it was a business that we've never been in. So it was totally new, and just learning about the business and the excitement of growing a business, both organically and inorganically, was very exciting. Second thing is, if you look at it at the core, the pharmaceutical business, if you look at the mission of any good pharma company, is really to look at how we can alleviate human suffering and reduce the burden of disease. So in a country like India, it's even more prevalent. So it is always a nice mission to work for, and it was very, very, I think in that sense, satisfying. Also satisfying is that, yes, you could acquire multinationals and actually perform much better as an Indian company. Otherwise, very often we have this thing that multinationals are the best. But I think here we could demonstrate that Indian management was better than what any multinational was. And this whole process, there were a lot of challenges. We were unknown in the field. We got where it is. And I think during this time, what we realized is also we practiced a lot of what we call our value-based management, which also gave concrete results. So, and in the end, I felt that I felt the grace of the Lord across this journey. It's very difficult, otherwise it's virtually impossible. for somebody who has no experience in pharmaceuticals when there are so many other veterans around to move at such a rapid pace, to grow so fast? So I could actually experience that grace of the Lord at every stage. So that's why to me that was the most joyful.
How very nice to know that, Ajay ji. You know, you talked about the values which gave you the strength to make the entire organization rise. And that, and I'm sure a few other things really helped you in the journey. So, what is it that when you look back at that time, what is it that all of you did? Because, you know, it sounds like almost like a fairy tale. You get into something new and then you become one of the most significant players in that. So, what enabled you to do that? Could you tell us a little bit more about what actually happened?
So I think in some ways it's really a story of entrepreneurship. And I know that you have many young students of entrepreneurship here in your program. So first of all, I think what is important in entrepreneurship is that you have to be successful, you have to go on the path less traveled. In this case, if you were, I know there were many of the other of my fellow businessmen who are in textiles. When we went into pharmaceuticals through this acquisition, everybody actually was looking at me and saying that this guy doesn't understand. Why is he going into pharmaceuticals? So that is one thing where if you believe in something, and the only way you can really stand out is if you go on the path less traveled. It doesn't mean that you just go on that path, but you have to understand what are the risks and still go on it. But unless you take some risk, you will not succeed as an entrepreneur. Otherwise, it's better to remain whatever you are doing in a, but if you want to go exponentially, and that's what results have shown. I know so many of my friends who were in this space of textiles have actually suffered, and people used to make fun of me when we first entered. So I would say path less traveled is very important. Second thing is, okay, go ahead if you
No,
want
no,
to
no, no,
ask.
no, no, no. Please go
Second
ahead.
thing is, I believe that you should not go only on headlines. When the time we entered the business, the headline said that India was a very bad market for pharmaceuticals, and therefore every pharmaceutical multinational wanted to sell out. But when you went into one more level, and frankly, the headlines is what people read in the newspaper. That's what all the consultants say, the same thing. You have to go beyond that to understand. And we realized that there was a huge potential. So that was the second thing, if I may say. Third thing I realized is that you have to run on values, and values create economic value. So, for instance, we had made certain commitments when we acquired it from from the multinational, that we would not export in the same brand, that we would, since it was a global brand, we would have the quality of global standards. We maintained it in letter and spirit, which meant that every multinational after that who wanted to sell came to us, and we actually paid a lower price. So again, your values makes the difference. And in terms of sheer numbers, when we bought the business, we paid 0.3 times of sales as value. And when we sold the business in 2010, we got 9.5 times sales. So you can imagine, so almost 30 times value difference. So this is some of the things that I've learned.
That's absolutely amazing. Ajay ji, you know what you used the phrase what consultants and the conventional wisdom is about, because I remember CK Pralad's theory on he and Gary Hamel talking about core competency, and a lot of global consulting companies that who entered India telling many family owned businesses that you ought to stick to your knittings, you must identify your core competencies. And there were some entrepreneurs like you who said India is not a developed market like United States where you can straight away borrow a Western concept of core competence. This is the place of a lot of opportunities because the economy was just beginning to, at that time, get out of its slumber, as it were. And so the theory that here the same Western models cannot be applied here. And so what is your response to that? You probably implied that, but I just thought I'll ask you to
You've
comment.
answered it. Actually, what is a core competence? I think you have to understand core competence in India means to really know where are the opportunities which are going to emerge out in some time and take advantage of that. I think that is core competence. And if you see everybody who's been successful, they have done that. It's not, otherwise, no new business would have come. I mean, you would not. So I think that's the thing. As you have said, this is not a developed market. It is a growing market. People are, I mean, if there was, I know that a McKinsey Consulting, I think, had said that when the mobile phone first came, that there's no market for it. So one has to go beyond that.
You know, Ajayji, you also talked about making value out of values, and I couldn't agree with you more because that intangible really makes a difference. So this brings me to the topic that I think many people are interested in knowing. You have been a student of Vedant and the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads. And you are the only organization, business organization I know that even on the walls of your offices, you have shlokas of the Bhagavad Gita. So for you, it's not just for the sake of showing it, it comes very deep from who you are. Could you talk a little bit more about your inner journey and how you derived, you know, the strength from our wisdom traditions?
So I think it's very difficult to say one thing that, and so it's a journey. So first of all, I think that I am blessed. I'm blessed to have been born in a family where my parents were spiritual. So both my father, my mother, my grandmother, so all of them had this spiritual feeling. And so that was the environment that you're born in the house. But I think it's more than that, because I have seen that there are people who are born in the same house. Some of them are more inclined and others are not. I think it's somewhere a blessing of, you believe me, it's like your previous birth, you must have done something, so it carries on. To get this faith is not normal. So I think, again, I'm blessed that there's a faith. But when the formal learning, and you spoke about Chinmaya Mission, my introduction to Chinmaya Mission in a regular formal basis started when my son was pretty young. I think he must have been about 15, 16, and he was going to study abroad in Europe. And then he felt that he should understand our scriptures better when he went there. And that's when we had, by good fortune, that Swami Satmananji first started coming to us. And that journey continues now for the last 20 years on a regular weekly basis. So that's where the journey started. And it has had, I always had a deep, I think, a connect, and this has had an even greater connect. And, you know, as you keep revisiting things which you've heard before, I think it just keeps on sinking more and more. So, for instance, the concept of, you know, that really it's action, and that if you do the right, if you do put full effort in doing action, the result is just action in another form. To me, that is so critical. So, without worrying too much about the result and focusing on the result, to focus on action makes you so much more productive. So to me, that is so important. Second thing I learn is that to be equanimous. You know, it's very, many people from outside think when you've seen some success, or you've seen, you know, you read the articles in the newspaper or somewhere, people will say, this guy must be having no problem. But let me assure you that every one of us goes through difficulty. But how do you tackle those challenging times is where, frankly, that's what the scriptures teach us. And, you know, you keep reminding, it's very easy, at least I keep forgetting, but when it keeps back again and again, then that is, to me, another reminder. So there are so many such. The whole concept of trusteeship, which we have incorporated in our group, is all because of what the Gita teaches. When the Lord says that you are just a mere instrument and a trustee. So there are so many, I can go on.
Ajay, like you, I was also very blessed to be born in a family like that. And I was 5 when I met Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda. And all of my life was, thanks to his blessings, it turned out to be the way it is. I want to ask you a question, particularly since you refer to challenges and how Bhagavad Gita enabled you to handle the challenges. Could you talk about some particularly difficult period in your life or something that happened? There was a challenge, and how this inner journey helped you to deal with that challenge?
So I'm going to first begin with a story, and then I'm going to tell you the challenge. Many people know this story, but it's not a new story. Many must have read it, heard it, but it has had such a deep impression in my life that I have to say it. And this is the story of this, a young boy is having a dream. And in that dream, the boy is walking on a beach, and he's accompanied on his side by another older person. And during that dream, the boy's life goes past him in that dream. In his dream, he goes through all the major incidents in his life. And he realizes that that journey is he and the older man are going together. And in that, he realizes that at certain times on the sand, there are footprints, which are two pairs of footprints. And at some times, there is only one set of footprints. Then in the dream, again, he realizes that when there are two sets of footprints is when things are good in his life. Those are the joyful times, as you talked about. And when there's only one set of footprints is when there is challenging times. So in his dream, and he realizes that this old man is actually God. So in his dream, he's asking God, that what is this God? You are supposed to be my friend. You're supposed to be my caretaker. You are with me. But in the nice times, you are with me. In the tough times, you have forsaken me. And then God replies that in the tough times is when I carried you. So that has been my life. So anytime there is tough, so that's what I want to tell even young people, that there will be tough times. There is nobody in the world, at least I don't know. I know people who have been much more successful than me today when I see them. But if you were to ask them, have they had no tough times? I don't believe it. So now I come to our tough times. I was 24 when my father passed away in 30 seconds. He had a heart attack and immediately passed away. In those days, I'm talking of the late 70s, there were you didn't have bypass and you didn't have all these CT scans and angios and this and that. So he passed away. And I was very close to him. After that, we were three brothers. Two of us were together and one decided to separate. The day we had a separation of our family business, 15 days later was a textile strike, which has been the longest textile strike in the history of the world, means the entire industry shut. So that was in our part. So whatever difficulty, I spoke about textile difficulty, that's when it started. 18 months that strike took place. In the height of the strike, my elder brother, who was then the chairman of the group, got cancer and passed away at 34. And I was therefore in a time struggling with a business which was going down because of the strike. My brother, who was very close to me, and he had, his wife was 30, he had 3 kids whom I had to look after, and my mother. So all this happened. And therefore we were really, if I may say, really difficult times in terms of business, in terms of family. But we came out, and according to me, the lesson is that in challenges, there are opportunities. If we would have remained in textiles, and let's say this strike had not taken place, if we had not gone through all those problems, we probably would not have looked at pharmaceuticals. No, then you'd have been an average. So history changed. And in that sense, I think, and I can give you many instances where there have been challenges and there have actually been opportunities. So we have to just look, as they say, if one door closes, a Lord opens the next door. So we have to look for that.
How very nice, Anil. Now, please help me to understand that this whole crisis that is going on currently, the COVID crisis, which came all of a sudden. Of course, some people say that some of the people had even seen it coming, that the world was not prepared for a pandemic and so on and so forth. But how are you interpreting the enormity of this challenge, and how are you grasping what's happening in the world in the events based on your own wisdom? And how are you and your organization responding to this challenge?
So again, since we're in the mood of stories, I'm going to give you another story. When you take a flight, the takeoff is not under your control. The landing of the flight is not under your control. What happens during the flight in terms of turbulence, in terms of that is not in your control. I look at life exactly like that. That we don't know when you're going to be born, you don't know when you're going to die. You don't know what is the outside environment. The only thing that you have control is your own self. So you'll find in a flight, there are some people when there's turbulence are sleeping, they are enjoying their food, they're enjoying their drink, their movie, whatever it is, and there are others who have all the prayer beads and thinking and stressing and all that. So similarly, the environment outside cannot be controlled by us. It's internally that we have to control, and we have to recognize that this too will pass. So I come to that is this too will pass. But clearly this is a big crisis. I think the world has not seen that the whole world has come to a standstill, and it's an unknown enemy. So what do? One is, of course, you have to keep composed so that you can focus on trying to act rather than just getting worried. So what are we doing? I mean, we are ensuring, first of all, we're ensuring that people are safe. Safety is very important, not only of ourselves, of our employees and this, and people need to get the confidence that you are working towards their safety. I think that is first thing. Second thing is that you have to be also, I think this is the time when one has to manage the balance sheet. And what I mean is that you have to forget about profitability. 1 or 2 years profits are going to be low, they may not be there, it doesn't matter. But will you remain solvent? And for that, whatever be the business, you have to look at your liquidity to ensure that you can maintain liquidity. How can you do that? One is to see that if you can raise funding from whatever it is, let's do that. Secondly, what you need to look at is how you can cut expenses, whether it is capital expenses. I mean, do you have to invest in a new plant, in a new, whatever new business, or grow your business? I think you have to be conservative in spending capital. And on operational expenses also, one has to lower them. And then one has to reinvent the business. It's not going to remain the same for a long, long time. So how can you reinvent? How can you reimagine your business is what is there. And at the end of the day, I cannot say for all because that would be not correct. But in many businesses, there could be these challenges will give rise to opportunities. So that's how we look at it.
That's very nice. Could you talk a little bit more about how a particular response has been done by one of your businesses or of the group to respond to that?
So let's look at our parent company, Piramal Enterprises, we have two major businesses. One is we have a pharmaceutical business and we have a lending business. Now, in the pharmaceutical business, actually has not been as affected by. Actually, it has not been affected at all by the crisis of COVID. But the lending business has, because people whom you have lent to are not in a position immediately to repay the money. They would take more time. So what did we do? We really focused on getting liquidity. Focused on, and therefore what we did is the pharmaceutical business, we divested part of it, or rather, we asked another private equity firm to come in as our partners with 20% equity. They've put in additional, so that that business actually gets further strengthened to grow in a time like this. So actually, it's an opportunity. How do you make this challenge is an opportunity for us? Second thing is in the financial services business, we had anyway expected that we should get more liquidity. And so I believe that we are strong enough in liquidity. And my belief is that there are many who will not be able to survive this crisis. So again, there will be opportunities maybe next year when there will be much less competition. And therefore, will be few of us. And therefore, the focus is on liquidity. Today, I'm not worried about the profit. I'm worried on liquidity. So even if it's at a higher cost a little bit, if I have to raise funding, I will do that. So that's the way we are responding. And then, of course, we're looking at a lot of costs, seeing how we can become much more efficient and more resilient. That's what it is.
Very nice. Ajayji, there are a lot of young people listening to you, and many of them have invested this year in joining a postgraduate program and doing an MBA. And so far, they are attending digital classes. There are others who are very keen to enroll in an MBA, but the typical fear that young people have that this year the job market will not be great. What will happen to the loans they are taking to fund their education? And concerns of that kind. What is your message for these young people who are concerned on whether they ought to be investing in their own education at this time?
So, in some ways, and I'm not going into the loans part because I don't know each one's situation, so I should not make a general other thing. But to the extent possible, this is the best time to invest in one's self. Because as I see the future, it's going to be a new normal. And the new normal will be people who will have to be agile enough. And there's not going to be a specific just one role. And I think that MBA gives you the breadth of the learning. So I believe that this is the right time because anyway, if jobs are difficult today, if they don't do an MBA, they may not get a job now. But I think things will change in a year or in 2 years. And if you are well equipped during this period, rather than looking out for a job, you can invest in your studies and equip yourself, you be more skilled, then you're going to be better positioned to take advantages. And this is exactly what happened in the global financial crisis. If you looked at it, people, and it did not affect India so much, but like if I look at the developed world in the US and all, that was a time when many people actually went to do the MBAs in 2009, 10. My son, I know, was at that time. And then they were much better placed after that. So when the crisis came, when the world came out of the crisis, they had great opportunities. So I think to the extent that they can manage with their loans, I think they will have a better future because work is going to change. And those people who know what's really happening today or learning today, they'll be better off.
You already probably indirectly referred to that and you use the word agility. But for the world of tomorrow, what would you like these people to learn more about in also the guidance to the educators in this group to say, what should they pay more attention to this year in the curriculum and into the way they develop the student?
I think you have to have a more flexible curriculum. I think, okay, according to me, what should be fixed and what should be variable, if I was to use those terms. First of all, I think you have to focus a lot on personal character, personal development, because that is the only thing which will remain with you in a changing world. So when I talk about values, I remember the title of a book. It was Swamiji had written, The Eternal Values in a Changing World. So these values are so important, and especially when the world is changing. So I think one has to focus on the fundamentals. And then everything else, one has to be much more open to learn. Even this learning of 2 years or 1 year MBA, whatever, this is not going to be. This is only preparing you to be able to learn new things. So now look at the way, I mean, our own business is becoming much more digital. I mean, we are now doing virtual businesses. We are selling residential complexes on the, digitally. So how do you adapt to that? How do you understand? So the basics are the same. How do you meet customers? But in which way to do it, the medium will be different, the method will be different. So I think what you have to probably prepare your students is that nothing is going to remain the same, and it'll keep changing with technology and all that. How do you keep yourself open to all this, but you have your basis right? So you have to have basics, whether it's values, you have to basics of finance, basic of understanding customers, all those basics are there, but it'll keep changing the way you will meet those. The needs will remain the same. How you satisfy the needs will change.
Wonderful. Now, Deen Dayalan, who runs a consulting firm, about 100 consultants who work with the blue-collar workers in companies. So he says his experience with most pharma industry is that there is a greater focus on quality through inspection and audit led by FDA. And rather than creating a culture with the production team where they take their own responsibility. And he said that pharma may learn from engineering and create an integrated manufacturing technology so that there is less dependence on the quality supervision, but it becomes a part of the way of doing things. And so what is your response to that? He says, where people who actually do the work take so much pride that they don't require really a quality department to inspect what they are doing.
I think I will partly agree with him that it is absolutely essential that the whole culture of the organization has to be that quality is important. And, just I have to say with some satisfaction that in our group, we have maybe about 14 plants all over the world, globally in pharmaceuticals, whether it's in India, in several parts of the country, whether it's in US, Canada, UK. And you've heard that almost all large companies, whether Indian or multinational, had issues with the FDA in terms of quality. I can say till now, we have not had a single issue with the FDA. That's because one is, it is very important that you bring in the culture. When I talked about values and how values create value, this is one of the values of integrity. What you think, what you do, what you think, what you speak, and what you do should be aligned. And that's why our quality is where it is. So that's one part which I agree with him. But there is more to it in quality as far as pharma is concerned. You have to have inspection because it is by law that you need independence, and the production alone cannot do it. You have to have quality standards. And unlike in other engineering and all that, in pharma, the standards for quality are being raised on a regular basis. Every 6 months, they enhance the quality of the product, and to more, not only quality but more important, they need reliability. You need assurance that there is not a single tablet that goes out which is which has a bad quality. It has to be traceable. So these are a lot of technologies put in, a lot of systems which only independent quality. We have not only quality control, we have also have quality assurance. So that's how I would look at it.
And one of our alumni of Soil, he talks about he works for the pharma industry. So he says, is there a story behind buying Nicholas Laboratories in 1988? And is there a story as to how that happened? And could you share the story behind
That's a long story, but I can just say that we had no experience. I was a young fellow, and it was, see, this is again, how the Lord sometimes, see, I'm sorry, but I keep saying this. Uh, it was just at one casual lunch, I met this lawyer, and he told me, this is, why don't you look at, I didn't even know him much. Why don't you look at it? So I just felt I did some back of envelopes. It was Saturday. I said, okay, next year, so we are interested. And then the whole process took 10 months because there were so many people who were interested. And I think it was a UK fellow. I told him, must have, when you're young, you have a lot of enthusiasm and all. He must have been really, he must have liked me, must have thought, and that's how actually, there's a long story, but this is how.
that? Okay.
So that's
Good.
what I say. That's when I said that there's another blessing. Otherwise, there was no way we should have got it.
Very nice. Gurleen Sethi, who's one of the young students in our new 2 years master's program in what we call business design. So she's asking a question. She said a lot of people are moving towards the healthcare sector. And sometimes something appears like a wave. So a lot of people are going there and trying to invest in healthcare. Is this the right thing to do, that a large number of people are moving to that sector? And how sustainable is this? Lot of people wanting to get into the same sector.
So first of all, I think in India, this whole concept about Atmanirbhar Bharat is very relevant. First, we must recognize that healthcare and pharmaceuticals is almost now, people have realized that it is almost like a defense industry. You need a military, you need an army, you need production of your own for armed forces. Similarly, health is going to become is a national requirement all over the world. I'm seeing this happening. This COVID-19 has said that most of the world was unprepared, and we in India, especially if you look at our investment in healthcare, we invest only 1.5% of our GDP into health, maybe 2%. Whereas, US is another extreme of 18%, but even other countries, 7, 8% is there. And we have so much catching up to do. So according to me, it is a huge area of investment, and we don't need to pay the amounts we are paying to buy. I'll tell you some of the equipment. Let's say in healthcare, if you need diagnostics, the amount we are spending, there's not that much technology. It can be done by us. So we need to do that. That's one. Like drugs, you see that why are we are the largest manufacturer of generic formulations in the world, because we could crack it. Similarly, we need to crack other areas, whether it is in terms of diagnostics, and all these are huge opportunity areas. So I would still say that it's the right time to be investing in.
I see. Parmeshwaran Hariharan, who's a management consultant, says that the COVID crisis will open up huge opportunities for India to become the pharma capital of the world. As an organization, what steps are you taking to seize this opportunity?
So actually, our business is a global business in pharma. So we are, and what we are finding is that it's not only India, but every country itself is trying to see, as I said, my previous answer was almost linked to this as well. Everybody wants to look at it as a strategic resource. So we are investing across the board, whether it is in the US, whether it is in UK, whether it is in India, because we believe that these are now going to be geography will be very important, because a resilient supply chain in pharma is important. So a lot of the people were relying on, say, countries for API and all, or the starting materials. They would want to see that the whole supply chain is more secure. So I think everywhere I see that.
Satish Shenoy, who's one of the senior presidents of the Aditya Birla Group, he's asking, what, according to you, will be the top 3 skills or traits that young professionals and students need to develop in order to make a mark?
So as I said before, I mean, one is that you have to have a solid foundation. This is the time I think only thing that will hold you together will be the foundation. So I think we have to play enough. Unfortunately, if I may say, so-called secular education does not give enough of a foundation. So that's important, whether it's in an MBA, whether it's in school, it doesn't matter. That's one. But what are I think one is that understanding and becoming familiar with technology is going to be the very, very important, because technology is taking so many leaps and bounds. Second thing is, how do you understand real consumer need? Understanding of the consumer, putting a consumer at the center is absolutely important. And the third thing is understanding basics of finance. It is important that whatever job you do, this is what at least I feel is, these are the key things.
You know, one of the students again in the Masters in Business Design is asking that what is the impact faced by Indian pharma companies currently in the United States who are having customers and markets in the US? How is this COVID crisis impacting them and their presence in America?
So it's varied. I think the crisis, as far as COVID is concerned, as far as pharma is concerned, as I said, everybody wants to ensure that the global, there's a resilience in the supply chain. That if there's a crisis, suppose there's a problem in India, will it affect the supplies of products in the US is a concern. That's why when you have a distributed manufacturing like we have, we believe that's an advantage. But I think before this, India, some of the Indian pharmaceutical companies, there are big changes taking place in the US markets. One is that, earlier you could have, if you had, it's getting technical, but if you had a copy of a product, you still got 6 months exclusivity and people made a lot of money. But now there's so much of competition that the prices have come down so much. So it's highly competitive. So unless you have a little bit of an edge or a niche, it's becoming difficult.
Vishal Singh is asking a question. What is your advice for Indian managers with respect to developing emotional intelligence? How important is that, you feel, in today's life and industry?
I think that's very important in any field of emotional intelligence. In fact, if you talk about in education, the 21st century skills, it's all about understanding emotional intelligence, which we have forgotten in our curriculum. I can tell you as a this, we have a foundation which is doing education, leadership, training leaders to be better headmasters. And now we've tied up, let's say, with the Dalai Lama, who also believes a lot in emotional learning, and Emory University to teach this. So this has to be a part of it. Emotional learning, skills and all will keep changing. You can adapt it, but emotional learning is at the core. When I talk about values, this is the same thing.
Yes. Yes, I was there with His Holiness, and when you also came there in that Delhi when we had the launch of that wonderful curriculum. And interestingly, in Soil from day one, we have incorporated that in our higher education curriculum.
Yes.
So, so it's like one day in a week, our students work on social innovation. They work with NGOs, and they go to Siddhbadi in the Chinmaya ashram and live there and learn from the Seva project of CORD, and so on and so forth. So I think you are absolutely right. This is something very, very amazing. There's another person who's asking about India's textile industry. He's saying that in the current situation, how can India and Indian textile industry, Rakesh Pundir is his name, how can India compete more with China in the textile industry?
So frankly, India, China is no more a competition. China has moved out a lot of the textile. Unfortunately, every time in textiles has been a story of a huge potential, but we have done nothing in it. And again, Bangladesh is so much of a bigger this thing in exports of the garments, or look at Sri Lanka, look at Vietnam. I think we have to just first of all unshackle there are too many rules which are there as far as the textile industry is concerned, as far as labor laws are concerned. There has to be more flexibility. We need to learn from what these other countries are doing, because textile is, once we have the raw material in India, you have cotton, you have polyester, everything is available. The know-how in India, I mean, it's there for 150 years. We are probably more know-how than any other country. Thirdly, it is a big, there is investments which are made in textile, and it is a big provider of jobs. So you have to push it. I mean, you have to remove these shackles, whether a regulation, whether, that's what it needs to be done. I mean, we moved out of textiles because there was so much of regulation.
Yes. Vipra Chakraborty is asking a question that the world which is disrupted by COVID, this of course will pass, as you said, but could there be some other form of disruption which is, the analogy for that is the Elon Musk kind of disruption. So, what do
So
you
there
feel
will
about?
be a lot of disruption. I mean, there is a lot of disruption going to take place. There's no question about it. Energy, for instance, will be disrupted. So you talked about Elon Musk. I mean, the day you get a good battery where storage of solar energy is possible, a lot of the conventional energy will not will change. I mean, there's going to be a huge amount of disruption, the way we do transport, the way we do communication. We've already seen the powers of communication during the lockdown. You've been able to work as effectively as you would not. And this is only going to increase with 5G, with so much else happening with. So disruption will be. Therefore, I think what we have to be ready as managers or as upcoming managers to see that everything will change. So the design, new design. So design, I heard many of them are doing in design. Of course, I think that's very important.
So, Praveen Gupta is asking a question about how organizations are driving cost-cutting measures, because sometimes that can lead to insecurity amongst people. And should the focus instead not be on encouraging greater collaboration so that they can find new answers to reduce cost rather than finding the easier method of reducing people?
According to me, you have to look at everything. It cannot be one or the other. I mean, just to look at collaboration and all is not enough. One has to do everything. In a new world, you have to look at it differently. There will be new skills which will require, there could be new jobs that are created. But I don't see that it's either or, it has to be and.
Okay. So you feel that the companies which are doing rationalization of manpower, etc., that that also becomes a part of the steps that they have to take.
Yes, I mean, if it is for survival, they have to do it. So here is what I keep giving the example of the plane again. When you sit in an aircraft, the crew at the beginning says that what is important is that if there's a fall in oxygen pressure, you have to take the oxygen mask. It's important that first you wear it so that, and then you look after the person next to you. So in the business also, if your business is not viable, then you can't do anything. So let us ensure the viability of the business. Only then will jobs be secure. Otherwise, everybody will sink.
And this is probably the tough part, because most people have a difficulty in letting go of people, and
I know
especially.
it's difficult, but we have to be, if you are doing it in the right way, in the dharmic way, then it's okay.
Okay. Which means it has to be done in a very fair way, transparent way, and make sure that you don't use this as a reason to do things which are not very transparent. Wonderful. Ajay, there's another related question which is linked to the role of family-owned businesses and professional management. Now, I know that you have your daughter working with you, and Nandini is a highly qualified person. You have your son working with you. And yet you have hired some of the finest professionals, and you have created this environment of high performance. So how do you sort of manage to get this whole, on one hand, the family members also get their rights and space, and professionals also get space? And how do you sort of combine this to
Yeah,
get
I
the
think to me, if you get the mixture of both family and professional, that is the best sort of outcome, because the advantage, and provided the family does not destroy the business, and the family, like I can see, I don't want to know, certain families, businesses in politics, you can see that the family, because you want people in leadership, they are destroying the whole business, the political party. So you have to be, so if you realize that a family does not destroy, it's in the interest of the, you have to ingrain it in the family that is in your interest, that the best comes out only because then your wealth increases. So therefore for that you need certain education, you need certain values. But then professionals, if you hire the right people, also recognize that if there is a family person in the top, then the values remain consistent. Then the commitment, the long term commitment is there. People also appreciate that. We must realize, otherwise, in a difficult time, it's very easy for a professional to hang up his boots. Today, I don't have a choice whether it's good or bad, I have to stay there, which makes a big, big difference. And in India, that's important. When you go, whether it is a shareholder, whether it is a lender, whether it's a customer who's buying a product which is, let's say, a housing product or something, they want to know who's behind in the family. So I think the ideal is both together.
wonderful. There is this question of one of the students who's saying that, because the campuses are not being able to open and there is a lot of digital education happening, would companies give it the same value as a real campus education? Would that be, how would companies look at this difference?
So I think there is a value to a campus, because I think it's, forget companies, should be the students we have to worry about first. There is a value in social, I mean, how do you deal with social interaction is very important. We are not an isolated, you cannot live in an island and work. Somewhere or the other, you have to work with people. So that is important. But otherwise, in terms of just sheer academic learning, I think this digital is as good. I've seen during this shutdown, we've been able to do a lot of work, but I don't think it can be a complete substitute. But part-time, I don't see any problem. I don't see companies worrying about it.
One of the students who is continuously raising the hand, but the name is not recognized, the person has some concern because he or she has not done very well in this so-called entrance exam like GMAT or CAT or whatever, and is just wondering, is there a opportunity in the future for a person who has not done very well in those exams, and could the person still manage to get a good education in the future?
So I think if I'm not fully aware of the exact, but I know that GMAT and all, you can keep doing it the second time. And frankly, even if you don't get the best education, I have seen people who've not come from the best schools. They don't have to go to the IIMs or the Harvards, but they have done very well in life. So to say that only you have to have a good education, yeah, maybe make a difference at the first time when you enter, in your first job, but you can leave behind it. There are many, many. It's each one individually what's important.
So one of the students who's on YouTube, Sabrish, is asking a question that you are one of the top companies in India with a diversified portfolio. And how will you look at new opportunities for your healthcare business in the future? And how much importance will you give that in the portfolio of businesses that you manage?
So as I spoke, I think healthcare is very important. And one of the reasons why we wanted to separate it out and got this private equity investor with 20% is to just show that it is important for us. And if it is separated as a separate entity, then more focus will be given. So let me say that we are focused on growing that, both organically as well as through acquisitions. And we will, whatever capital is necessary, required, we will do that.
Dr. Virender Sangwan, who's one of India's top ophthalmologists, and he came back from the United States to to now these days he works with the Shroff Hospital. So Virender is asking, do you think we can be global leaders in new drug development, and do we have that capability of doing the molecule development, and could we become the original sort of R&D capital of the world one day?
Dr. Sangwan, I am a very pro-India, very optimistic about India, but in this, I don't see that happening. You know this better than I do, but for drug development, it takes a lot more of, I think we have to actually raise the standard of our education. One of the biggest problems I've found is that in India, we are good in chemistry, but we are not so good in biology. That is where a lot of work is required to be done. Second thing is the way our whole system is still a lot of hierarchy. To want really to be good in research, you have to allow people to challenge each other. Here, we don't like to challenge who somebody is an authority. That's the way we've been brought up. So we need to change that. Thirdly, for research to really develop, you need a cluster, you need people, you need a whole area where there are lots of universities. Like you've seen that, in many parts of the US now, whether it's the Northeast corridor there, or whether you see, technology on the West Coast. So you need these. So it's going to take time, and I don't think we appreciate and the time taken. We think that research and pharmaceutical is more development. What we are good at is development. No company is spending on research. So I don't think it's going to happen. But actually in the world now, it's only happening in the US. Even Europe, which was in the forefront in the early times of the pharma industry, has fallen behind.
Sandeep Gupta, who's studying abroad in the healthcare field, he's asking how can Indian students studying on healthcare in other countries, are there opportunities like internships you provide to the students of India studying in America and doing their studies in healthcare?
Yeah, so there are internships that we provide, yeah.
Okay, you do that. Okay. Dr. Sarvesh Satija is asking a question. He says, in the wake of COVID, some pharma companies are overcharging at exorbitant rates. How do you see the ethical aspect versus the business part of the pharma companies?
So I agree. That is why you have to have a value-based system. That's where I'm saying these short-term measures are not good. And this all over the world, unfortunately, I found that many pharma companies have done that. So I don't agree with that, and that's where I am. So unless and until we recognize that we have to alleviate human suffering and reduce the burden of disease in the world. If we don't recognize that, sometime or the other, it is a challenge.
Priyasri Patodia, this will be the last question. She's asking that when you hire people in your organization, do you also assess their emotional quotient? If so, is there any particular tool or method you use to assess that?
So we do have methods to assess that. So we feel whether there's alignment with our values, which are all emotional. So that there is a methodology that we employ for that. Frankly, when I meet somebody, which is very few people I interview, to me, all of them have to first qualify on the emotional, because after a certain time, everything else is secondary to me. So yes.
Thank you, Ajayji. Ajayji, I'd like to summarize what I learned from you this evening. First, I learned that belief in the higher purpose and the Lord himself, that the Lord's grace, you attributed everything to the blessings that you received. And you mentioned that the spiritual part is the most important part of life. That gives you all the power. And you said to almost every conversation, you had an underpinning on values, and you attributed that to really the way you were brought up and the good fortune you had of learning with great masters and teachers and imbibing the wisdom from that. You also said there is a very practical dimension of leveraging values in the right way, because it really gives you an extra advantage and strength when you are values driven. You, in fact, said, amongst other things, it's the power of your values that ensure the way you picked up an organization at 0.3% of the annual sales, and 21 years later, you got 9.5 times the sales, which is almost 30 times. And you attributed the largest part of that on the, for example, the way you gave attention to quality, integrity. So that was very, very important. Then you said, in life, learning is a great gift. There will be many challenges you will face in life. And we must learn that in every challenge also there is an opportunity. And rather than just talk about it in a conceptual way, you have practically been demonstrating. For example, you gave the example that currently in this crisis, you said liquidity is extremely important. So let us raise funding where it is possible, even if the terms are not quite it could have been earlier. Get ready with your liquidity for handling the times when the markets will change. For the young people, you told them this is the best time to invest in education. You also showed them that this whole human qualities of compassion, altruism, the whole aspect of mindfulness that the Dalai Lama talks about, these are such important attributes. And therefore, you said this year, the inner journey and emotional development will be as important. And as far as skills are concerned, you singled out digital capability, which we are all getting used to, which all young people should talk about. You were also very practical when you talked about that organizations have to first focus on sustainability. They can't just be only in a very dreamy world to say we are going to postpone tough decisions. The tough decisions with a human face have to be taken with transparency so that you can protect the future and protect and serve the well-being of all. So Ajay ji, what a gift to have received from you, and not to mention the whole spirit of entrepreneurship that you continuously talked about. So thank you very much, Ajay ji, for being here today. Thank you for helping us to become better versions of ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you.